It's that time again. Time to open the box. In today's video, I will be revealing all of the things, well, most of the things that are in Sonnet's Makers box for January and showing you how I remade things that I made in the past or upcycled some thrifted finds. For this first project, these are 4 pieces of 3x5 scrap wood. They're about 3/4 of an inch thick or an inch thick, and I got them on Amazon and originally set them up to be pencil holders, and I made the front look like notebook paper and the back look like an eraser. I've decided to change them up, and now what I'm going to be doing is painting the fronts of all of them in white because we will be using some decoupage paper. Once that paint was dry, I pulled out these 2 beautiful birds from Sonnet's Makers box. There were actually 3. These are the 2 smaller ones, and then there's one that's bigger. But before I decoupage them onto my pencil holders, I decided to use some of the textured stamps by IOD. This is Vintage Textures. I wanted to kind of create a little bit more of an icy, wintry background on the paper, and also to kind of get an idea of what it looks like behind that paper. So I inked it up with some IOD black ink, and then I used the heat gun on it just to help it set a little bit faster so that I could come in with the liquid patina, which will be my decoupage medium, without smudging the ink. Now that everything is inked up and heat set, I am going to use the liquid patina to decoupage on this rice paper. I do end up misting the rice paper before I put it on the piece. I actually tried it both ways. One of them I did mist and the other one I didn't. Sometimes, because I'm not as used to working with the rice paper, I tend to not get enough of the decoupage medium on compared to when I use Royce's paper. I'm very used to using Royce's paper, which is much thinner. This is much more thick, so it is very, very durable, but it does not seem to stick for me as well as Royce's paper. So I think it's just a learning curve on my end. It is definitely not a problem with the paper itself. The paper is fantastic. And some of the ways that I have fixed that in the past when I do not put enough decoupage medium in is going back in with some more liquid patina, or sometimes I just go in with a glue stick and get those edges and corners. Before I set those aside to dry, I will cover both of the tops of this rice paper with that liquid patina again, and then set it aside to dry. For the other 2 pencil holders, I left the back in white, and I am taking these other 2 rice papers by Connie, and these are from Sonnet's very first Makers box. I'm 99% sure. And I'm going to be decoupaging these 2 onto the other ones. So I loved that I had the opportunity to organize a little bit this past month because it's also allowed me to remember some of the things I have in my stash. Once everything is dry, I come back with a sander and I'm just going to lightly sand along the sides to get that excess paper off. If you're new to doing decoupage, I will say that using some of this rice paper by Connie is probably going to be a great option for you because it is a little bit more durable, so you're not going to get as many potential accidents with ripping or anything as you work through, your comfort level with this process. Once I have everything sanded down, I now need to figure out what to do on the back because right now it still looks like a piece of notebook paper and an eraser. So I am taking another thing from Sonnet's Makers box this month. This is the Letterpress Gray paint by DIY, and I am going to paint the sides and the back in this color. Once that was dry, I am using some Grunge Gray Dixie Belle wax, and I am going to cover the entire back but also around the edges on the front just so it doesn't look like a very obvious stark line between where the decoupage paper and the white ends and the gray on the back begins. I just felt that kind of brought it together a little bit better. I do not put the gray all over the front. I really want that bird to stand out and all that detail to come through. For the flower pencil holders, I have painted the back in Prairie Gray, which is another color that I got from Sonnet's Makers box. I think it was in one of the boxes this fall. And I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to use the Grunge Gray. Now, I will say that I sealed both of the colors beforehand in a clear wax before I did this, but I want to show you something that happened to my gray. After my gray had dried, I got these like streaks, and I'm not sure exactly how or what happened. Comment below if you know what I might have done wrong. I was really surprised. I've never used this color before, but I've definitely used DIY paint before. So what I ended up doing was I took Newell by Fusion and mixed it with the letterpress gray and created almost like a midway between an all-in-one paint and then the chalk paint. And I was able to achieve a gray color that matched the front, but also gave me a little bit, I don't even want to say it's better coverage. It looked a little bit more even than whatever had happened to me in the piece before. I did both of the bird pencil holders with this color on the back, and then I went back and sealed it just to make sure that it was completely sealed. Here's our finished projects. This is a great way to create a more functional piece from a shelf sitter. For our next project, I have these two corbels that I got at the regular Goodwill. I originally got them thinking they would make great bookends, but I realized when I untaped them, because they were taped together, that the backs actually have like an insert for a screw or a nail. So I think it could work either way. I'm using one of the fusion colors from Sonnet's Maker's Box. This is the color Chestnut Mare, which I feel is a beautiful light terracotta color. I'm going to paint both corbels in this color. I'm going to give it 2 coats of this paint, let that dry, and now I'm going to come back and dry brush a lighter white color on top of these corbels to bring out the details. I am going very, very light with my paint to start because I wanted to make sure I wasn't too heavy with the white. I want the terracotta color, that chestnut mare, to really be the thing that shines, but I do want to see those details pop. For our next project, I have this Rae Dunn pencil holder that I have thrifted. I realized after I thrifted it that the base part, the part that I guess spins at the bottom, actually has an ink stain. And so I've been kind of trying to figure out what to do with this. I am going to start with Walk on Water, which is one of the new DIY paints and also one of the paints in Sonnet's Maker's Box this month. I'm going to paint all around the outside of the pencil holder. As I'm painting, I realize that the base of this, the part that spins, just has a screw on the bottom, right? So I ended up unscrewing it and decided to paint the bottom in a different color. After I got that base off, I decided to paint it in Blood Moon, which is a beautiful purple color and another one of the new DIY paints that came out this fall. I'm not sure if your kids go through phases of favorite colors, but Olivia has now decided that purple is her favorite color, as well as green, which actually she used to say that every color was her favorite except for green. So I don't know. I'll bet you by next year she'll have a new favorite. But this is going to be a little project that I am making for her room. She is a writer, a creator, and I wanted to make her something functional that she could put on her desk and keep all of her markers and pencils and pens. I'm adding in just a touch of Electrified, which is a very vibrant green color that was also part of this DIY release that just came out. I really only needed 1 coat of each of those colors. Talk about good coverage with this DIY paint. That's why I was so surprised earlier. I am now sealing it with Big Top by DIY, and here's a look at the finished project. For our next project, I have this basket that I got from my mother-in-law. I absolutely love the shape of it. As you can see, I have already tried to paint it in a variety of colors. It actually started out as a very Kelly green, and I tried to do some dry brushing. I tried to paint the top of it in a red that is Highlander by Fusion, and this was obviously originally going to be for Christmas, but we're going to change it up and make it a little bit more ready for spring. I'm going to use Elmwood, which is a fusion color, a newer fusion color that was in Sonnet's Maker's Box this month. When I'm painting a basket, there are a few things I like to consider. I need to make sure that my paint is not super thick because if it is, it will clump between the ridges of that weaving in the basket. So what I typically do is I use my water mister and mist my basket first, and then I might even wet my paintbrush a little bit before I start putting the paint on it and then subsequently putting the paint onto the basket. So it is something that has worked for me. I know that I'm not going to be able to get into all the nooks and crannies of the basket, but I do end up painting the entire outside and inside in this Elmwood color. That little container of paint was perfect to give this basket 2 coats inside and out. Once that was dry, I decided that I wanted to use some wax. I originally thought about using white wax, which is what I typically do for baskets, especially for the springtime, but I wanted to go in a different direction this time. I wasn't too much of a fan of how it was looking when I used the white wax, so I wiped it off and I came in with a dark wax instead. This is DIY's dark wax, and I'm using a little makeup brush that is a trick I learned from Kendra at Late Night Creations, which works really well to get into all the nooks and crannies and really smoothly brush on all of that wax. I'm going to cover the entire basket, and then I'm going to come back with my lint-free cloth and wipe back the excess. I'm definitely very happy with the decision I made to go with the dark wax. I feel like this color will look a lot better in contrast with a bunch of spring flowers and even like some of the more summery bright colors. This is my daughter's old bed frame. She got a new one over Christmas from my best friend who handed it down to her. And this piece right here, we are going to upcycle it to make something new. I will be honest, huge confession here. I have never been successful with decoupaging a napkin. And Sonnet every month gives us a little freebie in our maker's box. And this month, it of course was a napkin. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try the iron-on method for the first time with a napkin. I've done it before with recycled paper. We're going to try it today and see if I'm a little bit more successful with decoupaging a napkin. I am spreading liquid patina all over the insert within this part of what will now be, I guess, like a frame. I'm gonna use it in a functional way, but that's kind of what I'm going for at this point in my project. Once I have that liquid patina fully covering that inside, I let it dry. I let it sit for about 30 to 45 minutes. It might have been closer to an hour. And now I have the beautiful napkin that came in Sonnet's box. So what I'm going to do, instead of trying to cut it down to size, I'm not the best with like measurements like that. I decided to leave it as is, and I will come back later and figure out how to get the edges off. I am taking some parchment paper and my heat press, and I am going to be pressing down in every part where the liquid patina was. Right now you see me kind of moving fast throughout. I do know you probably want to be on a specific spot for maybe like 10 to 15, maybe even 20 seconds. I just get so nervous that I'm going to spend too much time in a spot. What has happened to me in the past with decoupaging napkins when I've done the other method, I've almost gotten it to the point where I've allowed the design to blur because of bleed through, or somehow I end up distorting the image on the napkin. That is something I did it the first time, and I figured it was because I had used water, like misted the napkin first. Then I tried doing it without misting and I still had trouble. I'm assuming it's because I put on too much liquid patina when I was covering it on top. So I figured with this method I was going to try it this way, and I'm trying to go all the way around but make sure that I have coverage all the way into those corners, because I do need this fully adhered before I move on to the next step. After that is fully adhered, I am going to be using a blade to cut the edges of the napkin that are kind of the excess, so that the edge of the napkin goes straight into right where that corner is. It worked out very well for me. There were a couple spots where the paper ripped a bit, but it wasn't so obvious that I felt that it took away from the project. I just had to be patient, and I'm not really good at being patient. Okay, so far so good. I'm so excited right now because it was decoupaged on beautifully. There are barely any wrinkles, and now's the hard part. I'm so scared I'm going to end up ruining this beautiful design. I decided to start with a fan brush and very, very lightly put some liquid patina on top to seal it. I do believe that before I did this, I spray sealed it because I was so nervous. So I did a very, very light spray seal, and now I'm using the liquid patina on top of that. I'm going to do it very lightly, let it dry, and then do another coat. So thin coats, but multiple times to give me the same type of coverage I would typically get when I feel like I can go in with the type of coverage I would need on the first try. I needed to fill in those holes, and I decided to try out some of this Das air dry clay, and it's like a wood clay, I guess is how it's described. I found this on Amazon. It was only $7.75. It works very similar to the regular air dry clay. The only difference is it has very soft wood fibers. To me, it felt like kinetic sand. Like I felt as though even when I had molded the pieces of the wood clay together, it still didn't feel, it almost still felt like it was grainy and still coming apart a little bit. I don't know if, it dried well, so, it worked. I'm curious if it would actually work to do something like with the molds and using it the same way we use air dry clay. If you have ever used this type of clay, please comment below and let me know. If you're interested in this type of clay, I will have a link in my description box. I let that clay dry overnight, and then I sanded it very quickly the next day just to make sure it was even and it had a very smooth top. Now I'm going to be painting the frame of this piece. I started out using a jadeite color, which I created using 3 different colors of DIY paint. Sonnet actually created or told us about this paint color, this paint mixture, in a live that I did with her back around Christmas time. So I will link that down below in the description box if you would like the recipe for that jadeite. I also believe she has a pin. If you go follow her on Pinterest, I can leave a link to that too, where you see the recipe as well. There are 3 different colors of DIY paint, and you mix them together in a certain way to achieve this color. I will say that after painting it on myself, I actually decided to switch or change directions and go with a fusion paint color that I felt matched a little bit better with what I was going for. This is Conservatory by Fusion, and the main reason that I wanted to switch colors wasn't just because it matched better. I don't know that it necessarily matches better. I think that greens are so versatile. It's easier, especially with this napkin. There are so many shades of green, but I really did choose it mainly because I was worried that if I ran out of that jadeite color and to have to mix it again, I was worried I wouldn't achieve the same look or the same color that I did the first time. So I wanted to just go with a standard color that is already pre-mixed, and that's why I chose Conservatory. I painted the entire frame of this piece as well as the entire back in this color. It really took only about 1.5 coats, mainly because I already had the jadeite painted on this front. The back took 2 coats. I haven't decided if I'm done with this piece yet or not, but I did use some Titebond Quick and Thick to glue on 3 clothespins so that my daughter can use this to hang some of her work in her room. No matter what, I'm so proud of myself for being able to get that napkin decoupaged on successfully. Allow me to introduce you to Daisy. Daisy was my most difficult, challenging project in today's video. And it's because I never thought of ever decoupaging or even working with, anything related to a cow skull in a project. It's just, I don't know. Maybe it's because of where I'm from. I'm from Delaware. I don't know. But it's just not something I thought of. And when I opened it up at first, I was like, oh my gosh, this is creepy. I couldn't wrap my head around it. And then I thought, okay, I'm gonna take just the flowers, and I can use the little artist brush and some water and just get the flowers out. And then, oh, look at this! The other paper that Royce made for Sonnet's box is actually this background by itself. So I could take those flowers and put it on. And then the more and more I thought about it, the more I was like, you know what? No, the purpose of this box is to bring us out of our comfort zone, to get us to try something new, to try new colors, to try new patterns, to try new
art. So that's what I'm going to do. I am going to do what I can to make this be something that I can fall in love with. And I did. So let's see what I did with this piece of decoupage paper.
This wooden chair, it was a chair, now it's just like a stool, was something that one of my mom's friends gave me about a year ago. She actually gave me a set of two. The other one I had painted and the back was great, but this one, the back was very wobbly. So I ended up having my husband help me get the top part off. I cut all the spindles off and I saved them in my stash. And I sanded everything down and painted the top white because I wanted to keep it as a stool because the base is excellent and just figure out a way to cover up those holes. Most of the holes are covered. You can see there's that one on the right hand side that isn't. But you know what? I embraced it and I'm going with it. I could have filled it in. It just wasn't in the cards this week. I had enough going on with this cow. Although my original thought was to centerize it, I decided that I did not want to take away the effect of having those horns there. I felt like it was going to look weird, and it just, to me, I almost would rather off center the rest of the actual cow's face and leave at least one of the two horns complete on the side. And I also really love that stamp that was in the upper left, and I wanted to somehow make sure that stayed on my project. Once I had the right position, I took a brush that was dipped in water and got it wet, and I dampened and created kind of like a line across my decoupage paper to cut off the excess that I wouldn't be needing for this project. I then grabbed my liquid patina and a mister and I got started on decoupaging. Now with a project big like this, you definitely want to make sure that you have a starter strip. Do not go in with all of the decoupage medium at once. It makes it much harder to avoid wrinkles. So I have my starter strip, I mist my paper, and then I very gently lay it down where I want to position it, and then gently press down all the way across that spot and move on. As I work across the piece, I am coming back with my hand and just smoothing down the paper. And now you see me poking holes in the two parts where there are holes in the chair. Instead of waiting till they dried and then possibly ripping the paper, I thought that if I did it while it was wet, when it dries, I could almost get the decoupage medium inside of those holes and just kind of finish it off that way. There is a slight curve on the base of this chair, on the seat of this chair, but I will say the Roycycle decoupage paper is, for me, so I absolutely love working with Royce's paper, and I feel like I've, with practice, I've gotten better and better at using it, and I was able to get this decoupage on with minimal wrinkles. There were still some, but it was way better than when I tried to tackle my very first project. So I was really happy with this, and I will tell you, as this is coming along, I'm starting to like my Daisy here. Even though it's only like part of her head now, I still really like her. And I do really like how those colors go with the base of the chair. I forgot to mention that I had painted this chair like a year ago. I told you guys I had finished them up. This chair was painted in Apothecary, and it was sealed with clear wax and then some dark wax, and that's what's on the base. So I think that with those florals and the greenery there really came together nicely. Now we're going to do some sanding. We're going to sand off all of those edges. Then I had to figure out what to do with the trim. I started with the letterpress gray, which was that DIY paint that came in Sonnet's box this month, but I felt like it looked too much like the Apothecary, that it didn't pop at all, and I really wanted something that was a little bit more obvious. So I decided to let this dry and then come back in with a different color. This is the color Flirtacious by DIY. It is one of the new paint colors that Debbie from Deb's Design Diary just came out with, and it was a perfect pink to match with those flowers on the cow's head. I will let you know that I am well aware that there is a lot of chippiness and old paint and everything around the rim of this seat. I have attempted sanding it down. It had layers and layers of paint on it, and I am now just embracing the fact that it is not a smooth finish around the rim. This is something that I'm keeping for myself. Once I have it painted, I was able to come back and wipe away any extra pink that was on the
decoupage paper because the decoupage paper had already been sealed. And now I'm going to be using some clear wax to seal the pink paint. Huge thank you to Sonnet and all of the creatives who created this box. It really challenged me, but I loved it. Thanks so much for joining me today. Please let me know in the comments below which one was your favorite project, and I look forward to seeing you again next time. Have a wonderful weekend.